Hey everyone, let's just dive right into this. This explainer is brought to you by CertFuel. They've got a really great Series 99 course with adaptive study quizzes, smart flashcards, and unlimited practice exams that are weighted just like the real thing. Go check them out at certfuel.com. Okay, so today we are stepping into the high-stakes, adrenaline-pumping world of margin and securities lending. We're talking borrowed money, borrowed shares, and the insanely strict rules that keep the whole financial system from just totally imploding. If you're prepping for the Series 99, you already know this is where the exam gets ruthless. So buckle up, because we're going to master this together. To make this stick, let's introduce our first player in today's story, Kara the client. So Kara's got a standard cash account, and sitting right there in that account is a cool $100,000 worth of fully paid stock. I want you to pause this explainer for a second and really think about it. Can Ollie, the ops associate, the guy who handles all the back office magic, just let her start borrowing cash against those shares right the second? If you guessed yes, you've fallen for the first trap. The answer is absolutely not. And here is the absolutely crucial takeaway. Collateral is not authorization. A cash account doesn't just magically transform into a margin account simply because there are securities sitting there acting as potential collateral. Before Ollie the ops associate can lend Kara a single dime, the firm actually needs two concrete things. They need a formally approved margin account, and they need Kara's signed margin agreement. Just having the assets is not enough. You gotta have the paperwork. Initial versus maintenance margin. Let's see how this all builds out. Okay, so once Kara actually gets that shiny new margin agreement signed, she starts trading. But keeping a margin position open is basically a two-part game. You've got initial margin and you've got maintenance margin. And honestly, the best way to remember this is the bouncer versus the bartender analogy. Think of initial margin as this massive, intimidating bouncer at an exclusive club. The bouncer only cares about one thing. Do you have enough cash to get in the door? But once you're inside, the rules completely change. Now you're dealing with maintenance margin, which is the bartender. The bartender watches you all night long, and if your equity drops too low, they cut you off and kick you out. The bouncer and the bartender are two entirely different tests. They answer different questions, and they use completely different percentages. The essential margin numbers. So what exactly are those percentages? Get a pen, because we're about to run a rapid-fire gauntlet of the exact numbers you literally must have memorized for exam day. These are the thresholds Ollie the ops associate is sweating over every single minute. First up is 50%. When Kara wants to make a long equity purchase on margin, the initial requirement, our bouncer, sets the bar at 50%. Meaning, if she wants $10,000 worth of stock, she's got to bring $5,000 to the door just to get in. Next number on your list, 25%. This right here is the bartender. For long marginable equity, the maintenance requirement is 25% of the current market value. If Kara's equity ever dips below 25% of whatever that stock happens to be worth today, she is in deep trouble. And here is our third number, $2,000. This is the absolute minimum equity floor required to even open a margin account. You basically can't start playing the margin game without at least $2,000 in equity. Sounds pretty straightforward, right? Well, scratch that, because hiding right behind that number is a massive exam trap. The $2,000 minimum equity floor actually has a purchase cost exception. What does that actually mean? Look, if Kara buys a stock that only costs $1,500 total, she does not have to deposit a full $2,000 just to satisfy the floor. She only has to deposit the $1,500 cost of the security. That's the whole transaction. Do not let the test trick you into thinking she has to deposit extra arbitrary cash above the actual purchase price. Okay, let's pivot over to short selling, which is where things start getting incredibly weird. The maintenance rules for short stock are actually price tiered. It's like a giant puzzle. If Kara shorts a stock that is trading at $5 a share or more, the maintenance margin is the greater of $5 per share or 30% of the current market value. But what happens if that stock drops below $5? The requirement shifts. It becomes the greater of $2.50 per share or 100% of the current market value. Ollie, the ops associate, has to track this matrix constantly because these cheap short stocks are ridiculously risky. And to finish off our numbers gauntlet, 150%. If Kara wants to short non-exempted equity, the total initial margin required is 150%. Now, if you're wondering where on earth that number comes from, it's actually super simple math. It's 100% of the retained proceeds from the sale itself, plus the 50% initial margin deposit that Kara has to bring to the table. 100 plus 50 equals 150%. Boom. Memorize that. Day trading and deficits. Kara is a huge fan of day trading. She's just constantly moving in and out of positions all day long. So how exactly does Ollie, the ops associate, track her risk? Listen closely. If you learned about the old day trading rules, I need you to completely erase them from your brain. The old pattern day trader regime, counting the day trades, the $25,000 minimums, the buying power multiples, that is all gone. It's dead. Instead, Ollie now tracks what's called the intraday margin level, or IML. The IML is simply the cash Kara could theoretically withdraw and still perfectly meet her maintenance margin. Anytime she makes a trade or withdrawal that eats into this cushion, it's an IML reducing transaction. And if she falls short, her IML goes negative. Which brings us right to the concept of a deficit. An intraday margin deficit is based on the absolute largest negative IML during that single day. Think about the gravity of that. Kara could be heavily in the red at 11 a.m., but then pull off a brilliant trade and actually end the day fully margined with plenty of cash at 4 p.m. Guess what? She still owes a deficit based on that 11 a.m. dip. Ollie has to track the absolute deepest hole she dug that day, not just where she happened to finish at the closing bell. She must satisfy that deficit as promptly as possible. Now, if Kara starts ignoring these deficits, our third character steps in, Sam the supervisor. Sam is the one who enforces the 90-day restriction. But here's the trick for the exam. One missed deficit is not enough to trigger this. Sam needs two distinct things to happen together. First, Kara must have a documented practice of missing these intraday margin deficits. Second, she must have at least one deficit sitting there unsatisfied past the 5th business day. When those two things combine, Sam slams down a massive 90-day restriction. For 90 days, Kara is completely blocked from taking on any new short positions or debit balances. She can close existing trades, sure, but her borrowing days are officially paused. Short sales and locates. Let's dig a little deeper into the mechanics of shorting. When Kara sells a stock short, she's literally selling something she doesn't own. That means Ollie, the ops associate, is on the hook to actually find those shares to deliver. So, pause the explainer again. Let's say Kara wants to short 10,000 shares of a crazy volatile tech stock. Ollie checks the firm's inventory. He doesn't see it, but he has a really strong gut feeling he can find those shares by settlement. Can he authorize the trade based purely on this belief? No way. The rule is completely unforgiving here. The locate requirement comes before the short sale, never after. Ollie cannot just believe he'll find the shares. That's literally like jumping out of an airplane based on a strong belief that you'll somehow find a parachute on the way down. It's ridiculous. Before Kara ever hits that sell button, Ollie must have a documented borrowing basis. That means the firm has already borrowed the security, arranged to borrow it, or has documented reasonable grounds for timely delivery. Oh, and fun fact, if the firm wants to use Kara's fully paid or excess margin securities to lend out, they need to give her advance written notice explaining all the risks and liquidation rights. All right, so what actually happens when Kara falls behind and gets hit with a margin call? You have to know these specific deadlines. On the left side here, an initial margin call runs on exactly one payment period. On the right side, other margin deficiencies, like your standard maintenance call, must be met as promptly as possible with a hard maximum of 15 business days. Do not mix these two up on the test. But wait, take a really close look at this exam trap. In reality, a margin call gives absolutely no guaranteed time to act. I'm going to repeat that because it's wild. Even if a quote-unquote deadline is set, Sam, the supervisor, has the absolute legal right to liquidate assets in any of Kara's accounts to cover the call without even attempting to contact her. The firm doesn't have to wait, and they definitely don't have to call. And the ultimate kicker, if Sam liquidates her assets and there is still a shortfall, Kara is still fully responsible for paying off that remaining debt. Margin is incredibly dangerous. This is exactly why firms are required to provide an annual margin disclosure outlining these massive risks to non-institutional clients before opening the account, and then again at least once each calendar year. Rapid-fire exam recap. Okay, take a deep breath. We are going to lock this whole thing in with a high-speed recap. Let's hammer home the biggest takeaways. Takeaway 1, collateral absolutely does not equal authorization. Just because Kara has $100,000 in our cash account doesn't mean she automatically gets margin credit. Ollie needs the formally approved margin account and the signed agreement. Period. End of story. Takeaway 2, the pattern day trader regime is dead and buried. No more counting individual trades, no more arbitrary $25,000 minimums. Everything is now based on tracking the intraday margin level. And remember, those deficits are based on the day's absolute largest negative dip. And finally, I'm going to leave you with this. If Sam, the supervisor, wakes up tomorrow morning, sees that Kara is in a margin deficit, and liquidates her entire account without sending a single email, without making one phone call, without waiting even a single minute, what rule did he break? Absolutely none. None at all. That is the harsh, unforgiving reality of margin risk. Keep studying, always remember the rules over the exceptions, and you are absolutely going to crush this exam.